What's going on, guys? TJ here with Daily Grind Fantasy Sports to help bring you the edge for this Week 9 11-game NFL slate. As you can tell, I'm by myself for this video. Matt has a little bit of a medical issue going on right now. He is okay. But for those of you who are not in our Discord and members, that is why Matt has been a little bit MIA here on the content side. He's hoping to be back and doing videos for you guys shortly because we know you guys love the free content. We are still continuing to cover everything through our website, staying up every NBA, NFL, MMA, slate, golf, hockey, CSGO, all esports, everything like that. Matt is still on the back end providing all that information for everybody, making sure our members are up to snuff and getting their leverage sheets and everything like that. So we are still obviously continuing to provide our members with the necessary tools, but for the free content side, yes, there has been a little bit of a lull, but that should pick back up this week as I will be covering NBA at least until the 15th. So some free content coming for you guys. If you'd like to become a member, Daily Grind Fantasy Sports, we have a ton of membership options. The link is below, so you can go ahead and check that out. We did just start doing a weekly membership. So if you want to give us a try, $10 a month, $10 a week, we also do have a monthly membership, and that also gets you some Fantasy Cruncher credits that you can redeem at your leisure. So definitely go ahead and check that out, guys. And like I said, the link is below. And if you could, if this is your first time stumbling upon this channel, welcome. If you could hit that subscribe button, really helps us out. If you could hit a like button on this video, if you like it, that'd be great too. And make sure you hit that notification bell too, so you know when we are putting out content for you guys. So yeah, we have an 11-game NFL slate here. We got Week 9. We got a bunch of good options. But before we go ahead and dive into the quarterback position, let's go ahead and take a look at the 11 games that we do have on this slate. We have Atlanta and we have New Orleans coming off that great win against Tampa Bay. Opened at 5.5-point favorites, now 6.5-point favorites. The over-under came down, currently at 41.5. We have the Raiders and we have the Giants. Raiders -3, so 3-point favorites. We got a 46.5 over-under. We got the Vikings and the Ravens. The Ravens currently 6-point favorites with a 50 over-under right now. We have the Browns and we got the Bengals. Bengals currently at home, 2.5-point favorites. Over-under currently set to a 47 with no Odell Beckham. Obviously for the Browns. We have the Broncos and the Cowboys. Cowboys 10-point favorites. We got Dak, who should be good to go and playing this week against the Broncos. 49 over-under right now. We got the Dolphins and the Texans in an absolute barn burner. 5.5-point favorites are the Dolphins. 46.5 over-under right now. We got the Bills and the Jaguars. 14.5-point favorites. A 48.5 over-under. We got my Pats playing Carolina. 3.5-point favorites are the Patriots on the road. We got a 41 over-under right now. Low-scoring game, maybe. Be careful of that. Chargers and Eagles currently set. We have the Chargers 1.5-point favorites. We got a 50 over-under. We got the Cardinals and the Niners. Niners 2.5-point favorites, obviously with the news on potentially D-Hop and Kyler Murray missing this game. So that's a 5-point difference at where it opened. So if you were able to get the Niners at 2.5-point dogs, then that was a fantastic bet, and tip of the cap to you. Currently sitting at 2.5-point favorites, 45.5 over under. We were going to have the game of the week here if Aaron Rodgers played, but right now we have the Kansas City Chiefs -7 at home, opened at 2.5-point favorites. So again, if you didn't know that Aaron Rodgers was going to test positive for COVID, but if you had a hinge or something like that and you got the line before it changed, the Chiefs opened up at 2.5-point favorites, so that was definitely a really good grab if you were able to get it. The over-under came down from a 55.5 to a 48 because of the news with Aaron Rodgers. Yeah, I guess his nickname is going to be Aaron Rodgers going forward. So let's go ahead and dive into the quarterback position right now. We got Josh Allen currently at $8,200, accruing the most ownership across the board. And rightfully so. It's a really good matchup here against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Matt, I am sorry. You know I love you, but your Jaguars are just pretty putrid, man. Josh Allen has been absolutely fantastic. The Buffalo Bills, the best team in the AFC. He's looked great, as you can see. He's hit value in every single game virtually so far this year. Against Miami in a game where it was a little bit more competitive, I think, than people thought. He got that rushing touchdown, which was huge. Completed almost 70% of his passes. He's been very accurate so far. He's without Dawson Knox. Dawson Knox set to miss this game as well. Cole Beasley currently carrying a questionable tag, so he might be down a couple receivers. I think Cole Beasley's going to play, but still no Dawson Knox. Tommy Sweeney going to take his place. I still love Josh Allen in this type of matchup against Jacksonville. They are 14.5-point favorites like we talked about. So I guess if this game does get out of hand a little bit in the second half, you might see Josh Allen, kind of take the foot off the gas, I guess, a little bit going into that fourth quarter. Maybe he's not out there throwing as much as he would in the first half if it's a competitive game. But I still do like him if you have the flexibility and the cash to go up and get him. That's where I would want to be starting my builds. Lamar Jackson is that other guy that is carrying some ownership. As you can see, the only two guys currently over 10% or double digits. I think that will change come lock tomorrow morning. But again, Lamar Jackson, just the rushing upside that he has week in and week out is fantastic. The Vikings are pretty good against opposing quarterbacks in terms of the passing ability. But even with that being said, and of course of course this is going on right now. Perfect. But even with that being said, like the rushing upside that Lamar has is just so big in DFS. So he's definitely a guy that I would love to get at $7,300. And like we talked about when we were covering the spreads, 6-point favorites. So it's should be more of a competitive game than we do have the Bills on the road at 14.5-point favorites and a 50 over under, which is a little bit higher, obviously, than that Bills Jacksonville game. So in a bit more of a competitive game script for Baltimore against Minnesota. If you want to save the $900 and go down to Lamar Jackson, I definitely don't hate it. But I would rather start my builds here in cash with Josh Allen. Not to say that Lamar Jackson is a worse build to start with. I think either one of these quarterbacks is definitely viable for cash. And then we kind of get into some of these spend down spots that some of these guys are carrying some ownership. The one guy I would be looking at would be Jordan Love at $4,400. His first career NFL start. Going on the road to Kansas City, a team that's obviously struggled defensively. They've given up the 5th most passing yards to opposing quarterbacks. They have looked better defensively over the last couple weeks. But I kind of have some faith in Jordan Love. This is his time to kind of show off his talent. He's got Devontae Adams, who should be good to go. He's got Aaron Jones, so he does have some bodies to be able to throw it to. He's got some good weapons. And it's a really good matchup on the road. I kind of do like going to him. Again, the team total over under right now is currently sitting at a 20.5. If you are looking for a cheap option, I don't hate it. Again, I'd rather go to a Josh Allen or a Lamar Jackson, especially in cash. Those are the safer options. But if you're looking for kind of a ballsy play, Jordan Love, maybe run him out in some tournaments. But $4,400 is a really cheap price tag. I understand it's on the road, his first career start, but it's a good matchup against Kansas City. Kansas City did just acquire Melvin Gordon, which should be a big asset for them in the linebacker position. But still, I do like Jordan Love at $4,400. Tua, if healthy, $5,800. He's somebody I'm eyeing. Devontae Parker, obviously, just set to are designated for IR, unfortunately, after just coming back. So I do like Tua at $5,800 as well. I have a lot of interest in Tyrod Taylor, currently at $5K. Really good matchup here against Miami. I like both of those cheap quarterbacks. I think both of them, in terms of their price tag, is way too cheap. Miami's given up the most passing yards to opposing quarterbacks right now through 8 weeks. So that's something to keep an eye on. I don't know what Tyrod Taylor's going to look like after coming back, and he hasn't played since week 2. But he is somebody that I am highly interested in. As you can tell, in his first 2 weeks against Jacksonville and Cleveland, he looked pretty good, before going out, obviously, in week 2 against Cleveland. So he's somebody that I think is a really good cheap option. I would just be worried maybe a little bit of rust there, coming back after not playing in almost 2 months. So something to definitely keep an eye on. Probably more of a tournament play. So I think for cash, for quarterbacks, I think the builds, you're going to want to try and spend up at Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. Outside of that, I think you can go to Jordan Love if you want to. I don't hate Tyrod Taylor, and obviously Tua, as long as he is good to go. I didn't talk about the injuries for the quarterback position, excuse me. We do have a couple guys that we are currently pending. Kyler Murray, the big one here, as he is questionable with the ankle injury. So that's something to keep an eye on. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers out with COVID. Tua is questionable. He should be good to go. Sam Darnold, questionable right now with a concussion. Tyrod Taylor, like I said, set to return first time since week 2. And then we have Trevor Siemian currently set to start for Jameis Winston. He's also somebody that I'm interested in. I think there's a lot of good quarterback plays. I think in terms of ownership, get up for Josh Allen, spend up, get up for Lamar Jackson if you can. This mid-tier range isn't carrying any type of ownership. A guy like Kirk Cousins on the other side of the ball in a game where they should be trailing. It's a really tough and stingy defense there for Baltimore. But, him on the road at 6,200 showing less than 2% ownership. Maybe have a stack with him and Thielen or Justin Jefferson. and see if that might be able to pay off in a big GPP. Dak Prescott should be good to go this week against Denver. Don't like the matchup there. They are at home, so I have some interest more so in the wide receiver picture, which we will get to. But yeah, Dak should be back. Something to keep an eye on as well. So yeah, I think there's a lot of good options for the quarterback. I'm looking in the cheap range. As you can see, I got some guys thumbs up. Trevor Siemian, good matchup against Atlanta at $5,400. And then also, like I talked about, I have some interest there in Tyrod Taylor, obviously. Tua up here at 58. Teddy Bridgewater, I do have some interest in as well at $5,300. These guys are more of tournament plays, but I think the one cash option that I think might come up a little bit might be Jordan Love here at $4,400. So definitely something to keep an eye on before the slate starts tomorrow morning on Sunday. So let's go ahead and jump into the running back position right now. In terms of ownership, we have Austin Eckler carrying the most ownership at 23.3%. We have Zeke at 17.3%. We got Myles Gaskin, 15.4% at $5,800. Elijah Mitchell currently at $5,800, showing 12.7% ownership. Cordero Patterson, fifth in terms of ownership at 12.1%. Tough matchup there against the Saints. In terms of running backs and injuries that we do have, we got CMC, who should be back, but something to keep an eye on. Obviously, if he's out, Chuba Hubbard would be that guy. James Robinson, currently questionable with the heel. We got Saquon, who was officially out, so Devontae Booker should be that guy in that backfield. And then we have Elijah Mitchell, like I just talked about, who is questionable. So something to keep an eye on with a rib injury. We do have Jeff Wilson, who might return as well, so could be a thorn in Elijah Mitchell, I struggle with that, in his side going forward. So definitely something to keep an eye on there. Obviously, we know Shanahan and that running back situation, he just kind of feeds whoever. There's no rhyme or reason for it. So, but yeah, something to keep an eye on. I really do like Eckler at $7,900. If you are starting with him in terms of your builds, it might be tough moving forward, especially if you're paying up for a Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson. But I really do like Eckler against Philly here. The Eagles have given up the sixth most rushing yards to opposing running backs. Eckler is a huge piece of that Chargers offense. The run aspect and just the passing upside or the receiving upside out of the backfield as well is huge for Eckler. As you can see, just the targets, they're always there for him, especially in games where they're trailing. They are currently favored by, we did talk about this, I just have to find it. They're currently favored by 1.5 points, so it should be a competitive game. I love Eckler in those types of games because he's going to get that rushing upside as well as that receiving upside of the backfield. So Eckler is a fantastic staple for cash at $7,900. I'd pass over Zeke personally and go to Myles Gaskin. I really like this matchup here against Houston. As you can see, that game is something that I kind of want to target. I like this Miami-Houston game a lot. We have the Miami Dolphins who are going up against Houston, who have currently given up the most rushing yards to opposing running backs. In a game where Miami should be playing with a lead, I mean, these might be the two worst teams in football. But yes, if Tua is good to go, I really like Gaskin here at $5,800. I think he is a guy that should carry a lot of ownership, and rightfully so. Playing with the lead, he should see an uptick in rushing attempts. I'm not going to put too much stock, obviously, in that Buffalo game against a really tough front seven. So I do like Gaskin here in the matchup against Houston. So I think he's a very good cash option. After that, in terms of guys carrying ownership, I'd be going to Devontae Booker here against the Raiders. The Raiders obviously dealing with a bunch of stuff going on with Henry Ruggs. They're in the top 10 in terms of rushing defense or giving up running yards to opposing offenses or running backs. So Devontae Booker in a really good spot here against the Raiders. $5,900. Obviously, Saquon is out. If you look at the running back snaps since Saquon has been out, Devontae Booker's played 85% of offensive snaps, 72, 82, and then 93 last week, which he was the only guy that eclipsed that 90% of offensive snaps. He's just been a workhorse just in terms of being out. He's being out on the field with Saquon sidelined. He's gotten double-digit attempts in each game. They continue to feed him, which is fantastic. He is getting targets also out of the backfield. So I just think at $5,900 against this Raider team, and Sterling Shepard out So just another guy that, should help Devontae Booker continue to get more looks out of the backfield. Also, Golladay might return. Looks like he's probably going to sit, though. So it might just be Tony and Booker here for the Giants in a really good matchup against the Raiders. So I personally would be going with Myles Gaskin and Devontae Booker. If you can't get up to Eckler, I would prioritize Eckler if you can. But in terms of cash, I think all those guys are viable options. Zach Moss, another guy that I'm really interested here at $5,300 going up against Jacksonville. Matt, again, I continue to pick on your Jacksonville Jaguars. The attempts haven't been there. He has been splitting carries with Devin Singletary, but in a game where they should be winning handsomely, I do like Zach Moss. I think he's got some decent upside here at $5,300. Boston Scott, another good matchup. Really good matchup here against the Chargers, who have given up the second most rushing yards to opposing running backs. If you started him in fantasy and season long, he paid off for you. If you started him in DFS at $4,400, he paid off for you. He got a lot of goal line work, obviously him and Howard. If you started, if you did start Gainwell, then that was a tough hit for you. If you started Jalen Hurts, also that was a tough hit for you as well. Who I really did like his matchup last week against the Lions. But it was those running backs. It was Howard. It was Boston Scott. I do like Boston Scott here against the Chargers at $5,200. I think he can go there. I think there's a lot of good cheap options here for cash. I think Myles Gaskins, Devontae Booker. I'd probably go Boston Scott next. I have some interest in Zach Moss. Got to keep an eye on some of these guys carrying injury tags, being CMC and James Robinson. But that's where I would be going for cash. Daryl Williams, another interesting name at $5,700. Got to keep an eye on Derek Gore, who just came out of absolutely nowhere in that Monday night game against the Giants. Had 11 attempts, found the end zone. So if that's going to continue to be a side in Daryl Williams' or a thorn in Daryl Williams' side, something to keep an eye on going forward. But I do have some interest in those Kansas City running backs as well. Wide receivers. Let's go ahead and see who's carrying some ownership here for wide receivers. And yes, it is Tyreek Hill at 21.5% ownership. Looked really good against the Giants. He had 18 targets. That's absolutely insane. 18 targets in one game. It's just absolutely asinine. Before I get too excited and talk about the ownerships here for the wide receivers, let's go ahead and see who is ending up on the injury report right now. We have DeAndre Hopkins currently questionable with a hamstring injury, so something to keep an eye on. We have CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper both carrying questionable tags, but they should be good to go. Debo currently questionable with a calf injury. That would be pretty significant there for the 49ers. Cole Beasley, like I talked about, currently questionable with a rib injury. Devontae Parker currently on IR because of the shoulder and hamstring injury that flared up for him, so he'll be out for the next at least 3 weeks. Sterling Shepard out. Rashad Bateman is currently questionable, but should be good to go. Sammy Watkins, also questionable, hasn't played since week 5, so if he's back, that might decrease the workload there for Rashad Bateman. But if Sammy Watkins continues to sit, then Bateman at 4K is definitely a viable option. We got AJ Green also out for the Cardinals, so we might have a game here for Arizona where they don't have Kyler Murray, they don't have D-Hop, and then AJ Green also out, so something to keep an eye on. Obviously, the departure of Odell as he got waived. Donovan Peoples-Jones is currently questionable, so if he sits, that's him and Odell both out. And then Michael Gallup could return here for Dallas, so something to keep an eye on as well. Tyreek Hill, love the matchup here against Green Bay. He is carrying a ton of ownership, and rightfully so. I still think even with Jordan Love, this should be somewhat competitive. I think there's going to be a lot of points here in this game, so if there's a lot of points, Tyreek Hill is your guy. 18 targets here against the Giants. As you can see, just the targets over the last 5 games. For me, normally, Travis Kelce's always been the guy that I've gone to and tried to be a staple in my cash builds. It's Tyreek Hill now. I think Tyreek Hill's been the more consistent player. He is healthy, obviously, so he's the guy that I'd be looking at here for Kansas City. And again, if you are starting builds if you're just building it in terms of ownership for cash, if you start Josh Allen, Eckler, and Tyreek Hill, it is going to be tough building for you to fill out the rest of your roster. I think there are some cheap options that you can go to, but I just think your cash build might be a little bit hindered, honestly. And I think there's some really good mid-tier range in the running back and wide receiver position this week. So something to keep an eye on. I think you can have a build with those 3 guys, but it might be tough. Amari Cooper. Absolute animal against Minnesota. I expect that to continue to be the case going forward. Like I said, he is questionable with the hamstring. It's something he's been dealing with the whole entire year. He's continued to play through it. So I do like Amari at 5,700. I think that price tag is way too cheap. I also have some interest in CeeDee Lamb, but if I can get Amari Cooper at a $1,500 discount, that's where I want to be going. So those two carrying the highest ownership on the slate, and rightfully so. We got T. Higgins currently third in ownership, $5,300 in a matchup against Cleveland, 14%. We got Stephon Diggs, $7,700 at 13.3% ownership, and then Brandon Cooks rounding out the top five at $6,100 at 13% ownership. I mean, it doesn't matter what's going on with Brandon Cooks, who his quarterback is with Davis Mills. He continues to be blowout proof. He plays the entire game, plays well into the fourth quarter like we saw against the Rams. And with Tyrod Taylor being back this week, that makes me like Brandon Cooks even more. As you can see, the production here for Cooks over the first 2 weeks while he had Tyrod Taylor was huge. He had obviously some good games with Davis Mills, but I think the connection the rapport that him and Tyrod Taylor had at the beginning of the year was big. I think that's something that Tyrod Taylor's going to look at going forward, obviously getting implemented if he does play this week. I think him looking to Brandon Cooks is something that could be big for this offense. Maybe get him a couple wins. I don't know. Probably not. They did almost beat the Patriots, so Patriots suck. They don't suck. They're the best. 4-4. Here we go. Playoff push. So I think in cash, I think Tyreek Hill, one of Tyreek Hill or Stephon Diggs in your lineup is a safe option. Obviously, Diggs in a good matchup here against Jacksonville. The only thing I ever get worried about here with the Bills offense is that they can, there's a lot of mouths to feed even with Dawson Knox out. We saw last week in a good matchup here for Diggs, just the targets weren't there. They were looking at Cole Beasley in the slot a lot more. So I think this is more of a game here for Diggs on the outside against Jacksonville. I personally lean Tyreek Hill at 7,900, but I couldn't hate you for going down to Diggs at 77. Cooks, I think, in a really good spot at 6,100, carrying some ownership. I do like that. Also, Hunter Renfrow at $4,800. Obviously, the Ruggs news, he's off the team. I think the uptick that Renfrow should see going forward should be pretty significant there in what could be a competitive and should be a competitive matchup against the Giants. So I think there are some guys carrying some ownership, and rightfully so. Marquise Brown, really good matchup against the Vikings. If Sammy Watkins does sit, he should continue to be that number 1A, 1B target there for Lamar Jackson with Mark Andrews. Again, Cole Beasley, questionable. Somebody to keep an eye on. If he does play, $5,400, really cheap with no Dawson Knox. Really good matchup there. As you can see, I have a couple other guys here thumbs up. But let's go ahead and continue on with just our cash plays here and move on to the tight end position where it's Dallas Goedert with no Zach Ertz at $4,500, carrying almost 18% ownership. We got Mike Gesicki in a good matchup here at $4,900, going up against Houston at 14.1%. We do have Mark Andrews showing 12% ownership, Darren Waller at 11% ownership, and those are the only four guys that are currently north of 10% in ownership. Dallas Goedert is going to be a guy that I'm going to continue to roster here in cash. The price tag came down from $4,700 to $4,500. The Chargers do defend the tight end position pretty well, but in a competitive game, I personally believe that Dallas Goedert is going to continue to be Jalen Hurts' number one option with no Zach Ertz in the picture anymore, who's in Arizona. So I love Goedert going forward if he's going to continue to be less than $5K. So at $4,500, him being a really good, I would consider him cheap cash option, is definitely where I'd want to go. I don't hate the Gesicki play at $4,900 and what I think should have a lot of points, honestly, Miami and Houston. I think it's two offenses that can compete and two horrible defenses. I'm looking at Houston now if Tyrod Taylor does play. So I don't hate the Gesicki call, especially with Devontae Parker being out. So if you have the $400, wouldn't mind going to him in cash as well. Dan Arnold is a guy that's just continuing to see targets. Looked good against Seattle. He had a good target game against Tennessee. Obviously, you can see the outlier there against Miami. So ever since Dan Arnold's been acquired since Jacksonville, he's been one of Trevor Lawrence's favorite targets. So I think that's a trend that's going to continue. $3,400. I think he's a good cheap option if you don't have the salary to go up to a Goddard or Gesicki. Kyle Pitts, talk about a guy that let everybody down when Ridley announced that he was going to be taking a step away, going up against Carolina. He saw a lot of double coverages. I think that was something that everybody should have seen, including myself. But I just saw Kyle Pitts at $6,300 with no Calvin Ridley and threw him in my lineups, and it didn't pan out, fortunately for me, and probably a lot of you. Travis Kelce, $7K. This is a guy that we used to staple into our lineups if we ever saw him less than $8K or at that $8K range. Just don't really like what I've seen from him as of late. Kind of looks old a little bit. I mean, he's 32 years old. I just think Tyreek Hill has obviously become that blanket for Patrick Mahomes. And I know it's not saying much. It's a role that he's had in the past, but we've always seen Travis Kelce over the middle kind of be that guy, especially on third downs that Mahomes would just automatically look to. Decent matchup here against Green Bay. I think he could have a big game. But again, I think going to these cheaper plays in Dallas Goedert, Gesicki, and Dan Arnold for tight end, it allows you to go ahead and spend up for the Josh Allens, the Austin Ecklers, the Tyreek Hills if you're trying to do that in your lineups. So that's where I would be going for cash. Tyler Conklin is always a guy that I think is a good cheap option. I personally prefer Dan Arnold, but he is somebody that you could go to at 3K. And then Dawson Knox, obviously being out. Tommy Sweeney got a little bit of a bump. If Cole Beasley does sit with Dawson Knox, then Tommy Sweeney would probably get a bump. I would prefer him over a guy like Tyler Conklin. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm looking at for the tight end position for cash. And then for the defense position, you got the Chiefs at $2,300 going up against Jordan Love, carrying 22.1% ownership, which is the highest ownership that I've seen on a defense. I'm trying to think who we took last week because their ownership was way off, or their price tag was way off. I think the same type of thing here. You know, the Chiefs, they obviously set their $2,300 price tag with the assumption that Aaron Rodgers was going to play. He is out with COVID. We got Jordan Love stepping into that starting role. So the Chiefs at $2,300, they're a pretty obvious play at home. So yeah, I think if you're playing cash, they're probably going to be 50%, maybe north of it. That's where I'd be going. Plain and simple. If you're playing cash, play the Chiefs defense. If you want to get different, look at some of those other low punt options, and you know, like the Vikings. Maybe they pick off Lamar Jackson, already fumbles twice, and they pick up one for a touchdown. So in cash, play the Chiefs. In tournaments, go to one of those other cheap options and hope you get a defensive touchdown. So that's it, guys. I know it was a little bit quicker than normal. I didn't go over too many tournament plays, but you know, without Matt and Kevin here, I kind of just wanted to get something out for you guys if you are building cash lineups for this weekend in this 11-game Week 9 slate. So if you could, guys, please go ahead and hit that like button. Go ahead and smash that subscribe button if you could as well, and always turn on that notification bell. And I appreciate the love as always, guys. We will see you tomorrow morning for a live stream. So if you want to come in, ask some questions, we'll definitely go over, me and Kevin will go over it a little bit more in depth in terms of our cash plays and our tournament plays as well. So good luck, guys. And with all that being said, let's cash.